So welcome everyone to today's social system mapping OnRamp session for July 10th, 2023. Your hosts today, as usual, are me, Christine Capra, the co-founder of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum, and Kara Martner, who's a producer of these sessions. And for those of you who are new today, which I see a few new faces, so that's exciting and fun. What this is essentially this community of practice is about, it's a vision about a possibility. The possibility being that social system mapping can help transformation networks and systems change networks become self-organizing more quickly and create greater collective wisdom and become more effective more quickly than they might otherwise with using a social system map, so that a social system map supports that possibility. It's a learning opportunity for people to learn what social system mapping is or to learn more about social system mapping. It's also an opportunity for us. It's a multilateral learning opportunity because everybody who shows up has some, this is an emerging practice, an emergent methodology that is not simply about the technology of mapping, but it's also about the social processes and change making. And so everybody who shows up honestly has some piece of that puzzle. And so we all come together for that multilateral learning stuff. We're a community of practice, meaning that there are these Monday sessions where we invite new people, but we also invite everyone to show up regularly or to get involved with more focused works. We have various kinds of teams that are working on various parts of this methodology. And so there's not just a show up and learn at the high level, but also the potential to become more involved if you're interested. And like I said, it's partly about the technology, but not everybody who is part of the community practice does the technical pieces of mapping. It's also about as I said, the various social processes, et cetera. So if there's any way that this is interesting to you and you want to learn more, connect more, we welcome that. So today's agenda, we're going to, in a moment, we're going to do some intros in the chat. Katy Mamen is going to share a map that she made about 4 years ago, a map around an ecosystem of collaboration for water justice and resilience. Then we will open it up for questions and answers from people. So we invite you to be thinking about things you'd like to be asking Katy as we proceed. We'll stop at 5 minutes to the top of the hour so that we can make some announcements, and then we'll close formally at the top of the hour. But for anyone who wants to stick around and wants to ask Katy more questions or ask me more questions, or anybody else who's present, we do the formal session lasts to the top of the hour, and then we have an extra half hour of just informal hangout, chat, etc. So when we stop at the top of the hour, just stick around for that if you have the time and want to. So let's go ahead. I'm going to stop share and let's just all take a moment to have fun. We have a lot of take a moment to go into the chat. And first in the chat, we'd love to see your name, pronoun, location, to whatever, answering whatever of that you feel inclined to share. There's no command performances, nothing is a demand, it's an invitation. Share what parts of that you like. And we have a lot of people still popping in. So welcome to those of you who just popped in. We're just getting started, and our first step is to do some chat introductions. So if you just jumped in and are willing, please go ahead into the chat, share your name, pronoun, location, and I'm gonna give you another couple of prompts in a moment, but all of this is absolutely voluntary. Don't feel obliged to input anything that you're not comfortable with. And then, so for the next piece of the chat, let's share with us one primary network that you're part of or that you're working with. If you're a consultant and you're working with a network, or if you're trying to develop a network that you're integral to, whatever it is, a primary one, the name of the network and what it's working on. If you could share that in the chat. And if there isn't such a thing, that's not a problem at all. It's all good, whatever order it all comes in. And then if you've done that, we'd love to know what's bringing you here today. What are the big questions or hopes that you're showing up with? And we can't swear that we will address all of them, but we will try, and it's good to know what they are so that we can, if we're able, we can fit them in. And I'm seeing a lot of new faces today, which is really great. And there are also new faces from all around the world. So we've got Vancouver, we've got South Africa, we've got India, Bay Area, California, Alberta, Canada. So it's great. Okay. So I'm seeing just learning from each other, like is always the top, one of our top reasons for showing up is to connect, to hear how what each other's doing in their work, and then exploring possibilities and just seeing what this is. So great. I'm considering doing a map. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you all. I'm really excited that we have Katy with us. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen one last time before I hand it over to Katy. And that is just for those of you who are new to this context, a social system map is basically a visualization tool, and Katy's going to walk us through one that she's made. But it's made with two different technology platforms, and this can be kind of confusing. And so just as a fundamental starting point to kind of get what you're looking at when we're looking at Katy's map, there's one piece of the one of the two of the pair of tools that we use is sumApp. sumApp is a data gathering tool. It's basically a very fancy survey tool that me and my partner built and continue to develop and work on, designed explicitly for this exact kind of mapping. So it's a little bit like a social network analysis data gathering tool, but it's designed to be more iterative, to be able to, for the network to continue to grow, for questions to continue to change. And it's designed to be sort of an ongoing map as opposed to a snapshot in time, and to be more user-friendly for the end users. So that's sumApp, which is, again, about gathering data and making it easy to gather data in an ongoing crowdsourced kind of way. And then that data gets linked into Kumu, which is a data visualization platform that visualizes graph networks. So anytime you see dots and lines, that's a graph network. And so Kumu is the platform that one will interact with the map in, and then Kumu and the map maker will design different views based on what it is they want to see. And then the map gets plugged back into sumApp. So that's one of the reasons this can be a little bit confusing, is because for most users, it looks like they're dealing with one interface. They're dealing with a survey tool, and then there's a map within the survey tool because of the way we link it. And so your users are only dealing with one thing to reduce friction for them. But for the map maker, there's actually two platforms. And so I just want to point that out. And then just because that's a thing that often we get questions about. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Katy Mamen, who is the principal of Water Bear Collective and who does, we talk about there being 3 different kinds of hats for mapping. One is the person who deals with the technical stuff. One is the person who deals with envisioning the map and sensing what's possible and then doing sense making. And Katy is one of the few people who does all 3 of those really well. And she's, yeah, a brilliant mapper. And I will stop sharing mine and sharing my screen and hand it over to you, Katy, to take over.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here and see you all. Yeah, I do a fair bit of mapping as a consultant. And I'd say most of my work is really in the realm of collaborative systems change. So I'm a facilitator and do a lot of multi-stakeholder facilitation for policy change, and got into network mapping through that. And this, I think, was actually what I'll be presenting today was my first network map. I've used Kumu a lot for causal loop mapping, for systems mapping, and helping ecosystems of leaders understand the bigger dynamics at play in the systems they're working in. And then was asked to do a systems map from a philanthropic foundation that's working on water and equity issues in LA. And so this is it. And what I think is pretty unique about this map, maybe relative to others that have been presented in this space, is that it's not mapping a fixed network. It's mapping a field and trying to understand the social field a little bit better. And so, yeah, I'll share a bit more about that. I'm going to actually just share a couple of slides first to get a bit of a sense of, to help you understand a little bit more the context of the map. I hope that's okay. I'll just be quick and then we'll get to the map itself. So this was, again, led by a foundation who were really interested in understanding the field that they were working in better. And they were asking questions like, people who are working on groundwater connected to people working on drinking water, and coming in with a lot of questions, really good questions about the field. So we ultimately mapped 150 leaders in the county who are working at the intersection of water and social justice, and really across different sectors: government, nonprofit, private sector, education, and philanthropy. And we asked them to put themselves on the map. So we created some collateral, some outreach materials, and that really spread far and wide. And again, like the initial seed was this philanthropy, really wanting to understand the field, but we kind of quickly saw it was an opportunity to serve the field, not just the organization. And so it was really designed in a way to help the system see itself and see what would happen. So it was a pretty experimental and fun project. So we found sumApp, and this is my first sumApp project, and really loved the way that it allowed people to map themselves into it and then be able to see the map. So we wanted to create something that was private to the people who are on it. So it's a little extra incentive for people to join and be able to use the map as a resource. And that worked out really well. We had, at the beginning, I did about 20 interviews with leaders across the field, just to understand better how we wanted to structure the map, kind of architecture of it, and what was it that leaders in the field were wanting to know about each other and the wider field, and make sure we designed for that. And then also, with the drop down menus, what exactly, like, we wanted to know what area of water people worked in. And so really wanted to get that nailed down before going into the map. So these interviews really helped inform that. And I don't know how we could have done the project without that piece. So, and then we also set up an advisory committee, and that was really helpful to really kind of help hold that bigger picture. And then again, the intent of the map was to understand the collaborative landscape, who knows who's working with who, better visibility of the field for leaders, have people be able to find each other and work together, and then identify opportunities where working together can improve information flows and collaborative impact. Yeah, so again, just quickly, there were some phases in the project. We at first formed the advisory committee, did the interviews, and really structured the guiding questions with the help of the advisory committee. And then I built the map and sumApp survey tool, created a prototype, and then worked with the advisory committee to refine it. And then we did that, big push of outreach, asked leaders to put themselves on the map and did a review of the map. And then this was kind of an interesting part too, which was using the map and the map images as the basis for a convening of about 20 or 30, I think it was maybe about 30 leaders from across the system to come together and do sense making together. So I had a bit of a sense making hat, and then we brought folks from the field to do sense making. And I really loved that part of it. And I know some of you too use maps in convenings. And I just found it like one of the most powerful tools for sparking helpful dialogue. And that was like a surprising aspect for me. So any questions so far before we go over to the map? All right. So this is the map. It looks a lot like many maps you've seen, maybe with a few more dots on it. I mean, in terms of the maps that I've done, this one has the most people on it. And this is, again, the map is only visible to people on the map. So I created a couple of views that are anonymous. So usually, what you'd see here is images of the people in the dots, and then names. So this has been scrubbed of that just for privacy. But the drop down, what we can filter for are which specific watersheds people are working in a county. And so, for example, LA River is the biggest one. So again, we can see here who's working in the LA River and how are they connected to each other, for example. And we also mapped geographic scope. So in addition to watershed, what are more of the kind of political boundaries where people are working? So, for example, central LA, again, this is a fairly small group of people, and they look pretty well connected to each other. So we did quite a bit of social network analysis with the map, and really identifying like who the connectors are in this ecosystem, and so on and so forth, the influencers, and that really did align with people's understanding, when we kind of brought those inferences back. And yeah, what I did pretty formally was to create a set of map inferences, like what do I think this map is telling us, and then brought that out to the field and used that for dialogue. We also mapped the priority water issues that people were working on. I think we asked like list the top 2 or 3 issues that you work squarely on. And you can see it's a pretty wide range of water issues that people work on, right? Water affordability, all the way through to upper watershed health, to climate change. So again, a lot of these maps, once we filter, look pretty similar. And then we also mapped what populations the organizations serve. And that, again, part of the intent was that people in the field told us this was what they wanted to learn about each other, or how they wanted to connect. So, for example, we could connect people in LA County who are working on water issues in service of immigrant communities. And again, so if I'm working in that space, I can do this filter and quickly find others who are working in that issue. And so it's a great way, again, for people to connect to each other. And we really encourage that. So as people put themselves on the map, we, periodically would reach out to them, ask them to update their connections, and, give a little bit more suggestion and guidance for how to use the map. We also, another kind of cross-cutting axis was areas of focus. So this isn't specific to water, but a lot of people are like working on water incidentally, but really their main focus is energy or environment or environmental justice or health equity. And so we were looking at like what those cross-cutting lenses are that people are dug into or working on. So if we go to environmental, yeah, so here again, we can also double filter. So these are people working on environmental justice, and we can find people working on EJ in the Los Angeles River Basin. So again, we get smaller and smaller populations, but can really hone in on who's doing what in this area. And then the last one is role. So whether people work legal, philanthropy, government, all of that was really helpful. And I'll also just say if any of these lists are helpful, I would be happy to share them. And I can share my email. I'll just share my email address in the chat here. I'm happy to share anything that would be of use to folks. Great. Yeah, I'm also seeing a question in the chat about challenges we ran into getting stakeholder support and engagement. That's a great question, and I'm trying to think of what the main challenges were. My sense was like it was pretty easy getting people to engage with the map initially, right? It was just like people were curious. I imagine some people didn't engage, and we had challenges engaging them, and they just aren't on the map. So we did, again, it was just a lot of outreach, and we also did some targeted outreach and to make sure we got specific sectors and folks on the map. But I would say I don't have a sense of how many people were on the map actually used it. So that's something, I'm really curious about, but we just didn't do a lot of evaluation after this project. So in any case, that's like the basic map. And then there are a lot of specific views, again, that help us dig in. And I'm not going to show a lot of those. I'm happy to answer questions about them. But this was just one other one I wanted to share, which is in LA County. Part of it was looking at the potential for building a collaborative systems change initiative, right? There's another foundation that was interested in funding that, and they were kind of interested, like, is there a potential for a collaborative systems change initiative here? And so I really wanted to map out, like, what are the other collaborative efforts happening in water in LA County? And that was one of the questions we asked. And so these were, at the time, all the different collaboratives or networks in LA County that touch on water. So the LA County Water Plan, there's LA Metro Measure, there's just a lot going on. And so one of the things we asked in the sumApp survey was which of these are you engaged in? And it was kind of interesting because what we found was, and you can see how they're clustering, like a lot of these are floating toward the middle, and it really, the way this map showed up really suggested to us that there was basically like a small number of people who are connected to a lot of different collaboratives in the county, and that actually in the convening turned out to be really an interesting conversation point and really true. And our sense was that there is like a small sphere of influence in a lot of these different political and collaborative spaces. And one of the takeaways was that actually we need to really expand the voices at the table here. And it wasn't in terms of like the diversity of voices in terms of, sectors or, across issues, but really just the same, 15 or 20 people influencing these places. So people who are kind of leading some of these efforts were part of the process, and I think that was a helpful takeaway for them. And again, like in a lot of projects, we can also just hone in and focus in on collaborative and who's involved in it, and do some searches. So just the last thing that I want to share before we move into more of a discussion is some of the inferences. And takeaways from the project. So what I did was created about 15 or 20 slides with a inference, like what do I think this map is telling us, and then brought that into the convening and used it as a discussion point. And one of the pieces of data that we collected from people but didn't put like out is race or racial identity. But so that was like kept private, but we did map it anonymously. And this was the result. So I don't know if you can see this very well. Maybe I'll zoom in a little. But this is the network of people who mapped their racial identity. And then so we kind of looked at the network structure, the field relational structure around race. And what I just put a circle around kind of the core here. And the orange is Latino folks. The green is white folks. The blue are Asian or Pacific Islander folks. And so you can see like there's a pretty, LA's got actually an incredible leadership landscape of Latinx leaders, and that really showed here in the water space. But what we see too is that that Black folks who are mapped in yellow are few in number and really at the periphery of this landscape. And also Native American folks who are in this kind of burgundy color, basically not present. So I kind of went a layer deeper and mapped folks that included African American as one of multiple identities and Native American as one of multiple identities. So those are the ones with the bullseye. I don't know if you can see that very well, but with the yellow in the center of the bullseye is someone who is bi or multiracial and has African American as one of those identities. And then Native American has white in the middle as one of multiple identities. So again, you can see that they're really out around the periphery. And this like really, felt like a powerful image to me. And when we got in the room with, these 20 or 30 leaders, this was like the most powerful discussion piece in the room, because I think, we had a very racially diverse room. And I think this map, like, my sense was that it gave people a sense of like relaxing into it in a sense, because I think there was like a big felt sense that this was the case. But actually seeing a visual data visualization really was powerful. And so a big takeaway from the session was real commitment to, for proactive outreach, and particularly the Latinx leaders in the room were just like, oh my God, like this has been such a blind spot for us. And yeah, it was just really powerful. And then I also really like to do these snapshots of some of the drop-down filters. So this was a cross role in the system. And I just find this fascinating, right? Like if you look at the community of conservation environmental folks in the room, there's a lot of them. They're really well connected to each other. Kind of the same with policy and policy advocacy. But then maybe not surprisingly, when you get to local government, there are these little clusters that aren't connected. And my inference there is that, people in different areas of local government are connected to each other, but not kind of networking among each other. Academia and research, like some connections, but they're not very well connected to each other. The philanthropy is very well connected community. So again, like we can infer, which communities are better connected, and bringing that into the room and checking it out was super helpful. And then I also did that by watershed, and showed, in what watersheds are people actually collaborating better together. And this, that my inference was like, oh, the people in LA River are really working well together, and maybe people in Santa Clara River not so much. And that was reflected or kind of affirmed in the room as well. So again, so you can kind of use these maps to say, okay, well, maybe we want to invest some time or resources in the Santa Clara River watershed to help people, build some collaborative relationships and impact. I think that was my last slide on that. So I'll just stop the share there and we can chat a little about it. So again, just to recap some of what I think are interesting about this project is like mapping field, like having a more open invitational mapping than, a fixed network. And then really using these kind of the data visualization as a way to deepen dialogue toward change. So yeah. What do
Thanks.
y'all think, or what does that spark for you? Or just curious if others have used mapping in those ways too. It'd be great to hear from your experience. I know there's so much experience and wisdom in this Zoom room.
And there's some questions in the chat. I'll pull them up. So
Oh, thanks. I'm not seeing
yeah, so let's see. You spoke to the
Mhm.
potential challenges, one, and then Natalia, you had a question about
Mhm.
who provided responses. Do you want to say that out loud, or do you want to, Katie, can you see it? Do you want to?
I can see it, but hi, Natalia. It's so good to see you here.
Yeah.
Natalia's a dear sister and amazing thinker.
And appreciate getting to see you in this format and learning with the wonderful work you're doing in LA, to name one place. I was curious about the 150 people that appear on the map. Do they all respond directly, or are some of the names or occupations plotted based off of someone saying that they also work with so and so and so and so and so and so?
If they're all directly mapped. So everybody was given a link that led them to sumApp, and this was before there was that the option of giving a link and having people put themselves on. So it's a lot easier now. I can't remember what the workaround was at the time, but I think I actually did it manually, like contact me and I'll send you a link. So Christine, you want to just comment on how that's so much easier now?
Well, so we do have, at first you had to load every name, or, someone had to manually put every name into sumApp. And now if you have other people that you want to just notify everybody that they can be on the map without loading them directly, there's a thing we call the opt-in form. And in fact, there's an opt-in form for our community of practice map in the chat. So if you want to just walk through that process and see our map, you scroll up and find that link. But so that does make it easier. It is still sort of an indirect ask. You can put it in a newsletter, or you can put it in another email and mail it out. Sometimes people do, though, if they're doing interviews, or if they can be gathering data in a way that they're not going to ask people, they're just going to manually put them in. But then you wouldn't be using the opt-in form. You would just be manually inputting the data for those people.
Right. And so I did this all manually, but now it would be great to use that. I just want to, for those who haven't maybe used sumApp before, I want to share, this is from a different map, but social gastronomy movement. I've shared this one on this space before, but this is what, if you get that link, and if I'm a participant putting myself on the map, this is what I'll see. So there's like, the introductory material, we ask for photo and a brief blurb, and that is often what you put up, on the main map. And then there's this survey. So there's the bio, the survey, I answer these questions about myself. And then a lot of that gets mapped onto my profile in the map. And then there's the connection. So I will say, like, who in this network do I know? So I click on them and I say how I'm connected to the person. And then that will show up in the connection information. And there's a lot that you can do with that. It's really fun. And then you can click on the map. And this is where you can, for private map, you can get, your own special view of the map. And I will say also, just a kind of technical point, geographic maps in Kumu through using sumApp, I have really struggled with. They don't always load. And I've been on with Kumu technical support a lot over the last few years, because this happens in several maps, and they seem to believe that I'm the only person this happens for. Christine, I see you shaking her head.
No, the geo maps are always really kind of tricky and fuzzy.
Yeah, they're a little fussy.
Is there?
Because it takes a while for the data to load if it's coming from sumApp, or I think even if it's coming from a complex Google sheet. So the map will load faster than the data points, and so it'll kind of appear like there's nobody in the map. But anyway, just to show you, for those who don't know the sumApp platform, that this is what it looks like. So all the data on the map is coming from people in the map themselves. So it's what they're mapping about themselves. They can choose not to answer questions. I'll just look up my own profile here and show you. So what the questions from the survey kind of pop into this side pane, this kind of profile of me, and you can choose to omit survey questions. So I also like to ask additional questions in the survey that don't appear in the profile, and use those other ways, like how did you hear about this, or you know, evaluatory information about the network backbone, or those kind of things.
So there's some other questions. Can I continue?
Yeah,
highlighting? Yeah.
Continue.
So Sound World is asking was the visioning changed by the sense making, which is a really great question about the iterative nature and the.
Yeah, I think it really was. Again, I mentioned one of the questions coming in was like, is this field ripe for a collaborative systems change initiative? I think the answer was no. That in fact, a lot of folks in the room who are more like community-based organizations and you know, kind of like under-resourced groups working for basic human rights and you know, working in poor communities and working on housing issues, these kind of things, really felt like they needed more capacity building, and like that as like a subfield, because systems change initiatives, you know, we often bring together people from across sectors, and so they were kind of saying like, as a sector, we're not well enough organized for that. Like what we need is to organize with each other and build power in our communities. And so it actually really did change that aspect of it. And then so they didn't move forward with a collaborative systems change initiative, but rather this foundation, other philanthropies in the room really channeled funding into what that part of the field is asking for. That was a pretty big, I think there's a lot of expectation, like, yeah, we're going to do this, like big systems change thing. And actually, no, but it was kind of another interesting that came out of it was like these 3 strategic priorities. And one of them was that there was just a ton of money coming in through bonds and other measures, like billions of dollars for water and water infrastructure. And so a strategy that came out of this whole process was bringing community voices into decision-making circles. So being on the boards of and commissions of the bodies that were deciding about how to give out this money, because that's been a big challenge in the past. Like all the money goes to wealthy communities and neighborhoods, and so there's a big effort around like building the capacity of leaders from disadvantaged communities to sit in leadership boards, and that's been, I think, pretty effective and powerful. So yeah, visioning changed by sense making in a lot of ways. And I think my strong sense is that individual organizations and leaders in the room really took away some powerful new ideas from the collaboration, the collaborative gathering that they, you know, brought forward in different ways.
And then Alex, question.
Yeah.
Alex, do you want to say that out? The one about,
sure.
For instance, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just really liked what you mentioned earlier when you developed a set of map inferences to kind of set the stage early on. But I just wondered whether or not during that pilot process or during the mapping process, did you invite other perspectives come in? And if you did, how did that change, or did it change anything in terms of the process?
So you're asking, did we invite other perspectives in of people who weren't on the map itself?
Or people that were on the map, look, because you set the initial stage, did other perspective change how you took the approach for dealing with the community? And I have to preface it by saying that I'm new to sumApp and Kumu, so I'm coming from just dealing with collective impact. So I'm
right.
Interested in that.
Well, I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, but let me try and answer it and see if it answers the question. The interviews at the beginning, I think, were really important in informing the you know, the map and the questions and the structure. We didn't do any formal addition of other perspectives outside of that, but I know that the steering committee and that the leaders in the foundation that I was working with did a lot of, kind of informal conversations on the side. Yeah, but there wasn't anything that happened kind of midway through that changed things. But I do really advocate for doing a ton of work up front to make sure you have all the categories and that they're framed the way the field sees it, not the way you see it, and really ground truthing that because I've kind of rushed through that process in a couple of other cases, and it sucks. You're like, oh, I forgot this whole thing. And then if you want to add it in, then you have to ask everybody to go back, and most people don't. And they really want to make sure it's solid up front. Alex, did that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up?
No, that was good. And yeah, it was really just to understand whether or not you had your initial mapped out inferences, and whether or not during the process
yeah.
it changed based on perspectives and dialogue that you had with the participants.
Oh yeah. No, we didn't have those any inferences ahead of time. It was more just open, and I think that's helpful, right? Not to I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it could be interesting to, state what your inferences and assumptions are up front, and then test them against what you're seeing. In this case, I mean, again, I was like an outside consultant, so I wasn't going in with my own inferences, and I think that was helpful. But Alex, you also asked another question about, did we map individuals or organizations or both? And in this map, and a lot of projects I do, it's individuals only. And then in one because I have never done a map where it's individuals and organizations, but I have used, again, so it's all individuals, but I've used that as a proxy. So I've sometimes create map views that have the organization label. And in one project, like if there are multiple people from an organization, one of them has to be the lead point of contact. And that's what we would map on the organization views, if that makes sense. But yeah, that often comes up in projects I work on, like, or should we map individuals or organizations, and what are the differences? But I really like to use these maps as ways to build relationships and look at the relationships between leaders in the field. It's one of the most powerful ways I think it can be used. So I like to focus on individuals.
And then Alex also had a question about onboarding. Do you want to ask that one, Alex?
Yeah, and that can be delayed until afterwards, because I realize that it may be separate, so I don't want to take up too much time. But it was really related to we do some part of the process, not necessarily on social systems mapping, but in other areas when we're collaborating with stakeholders in the ecosystem. We do kind of modes of practice to kind of instill how deep do the participants want to get into the work. And I'm happy to share what we've been doing, but I would do it for anybody that's interested afterwards.
So
it'd be great.
Mostly I'm seeing appreciations. Here's I'm not asking the appreciations, but Karen, I think you had a is there, did your question get answered? Is there more you'd like to?
I don't think it did. Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think it's just a quick one on whether, on how you learn about new individuals in the network. So can people in the network invite other people, or do they have to send you their network email addresses and then you have to reach out to them?
In this particular case, because it's a field, not a network, we strongly encouraged people to share it with their networks. So yeah, we didn't ask for that, but we did outreach. Both we asked people to send it, to their lists, but also through social media and whatever forms, because we wanted as many people as possible. And yeah, I think that worked pretty well. You don't have to invite people directly from sumApp. You can do it all sorts of ways.
Is it just a link that they can click on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Go
Yeah,
ahead. I'll let
Marcia.
you- No, you handle the chat. I apologize.
Okay, no, I just making my way through, but Marcia, sorry, is asking how long does it take to build expertise in system mapping as a consultant? Well, I'd say like for me, I hit the ground running with this project. You know, I offered to do it and was clear like I hadn't done one before and invested just a huge amount of time and energy in this project. And I'd say it was pretty quick. You know, I think within 6 months I had really gotten my head around it, but this community was super helpful. The sumApp community and the Slack channel and Kumu's Slack. But yeah, there are really a lot of challenges. And one thing that really helped me was kind of, you know, accumulating questions that I had that I couldn't quite figure out, and then having like an hour of technical support on the phone, right? Whether it's with sumApp folks or Kumu folks, I found that really helped me time-wise, because I'd spend like an hour trying to figure out how to turn this element blue. But again, like digging into it, getting part way, writing down all my questions, and then having like a 1 hour rapid fire support session with tech was really helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Or if we have a little extra time, it might be nice to hear a bit more from you, Alex. Here's a question. Does the sumApp platform cost also include the private Kumu map cost and all that tech support? No, the Kumu maps, the private maps are, I think, $9 a month. They're not that expensive. Yeah, per project. There's that, and then the tech support. The Slack channel is free, so and they're super responsive, and I use that a lot. But then I also did hire Kumu tech support. I think it was like $200 an hour, and for me that was well worth it.
Just in terms of the dual elements, I put a video about that where we explain dual elements. Rebecca, I don't want to take up Katie's time with that, but I put a link to a video about it. And if there are questions, we can talk about them in the after half hour if people want to stick around, but I want to just leave space for all the questions for Katie.
Yeah, and also just in addition to questions, just comments or your experience, if there's anything like an insight you have from your own mapping project that you want to share along these lines, that would be great to hear from you.
Do you think you're going to get people to re-engage over time? Or is that out of the scope of the work?
Well, with this particular project, it's basically over. That all the infrastructure is still there, and there was, a professor at UCLA who was interested in kind of taking the map project and running with it. But yeah, I did quite a lot of work at the end because it was really just a one-shot wonder, really. But then, once you invest all of this everybody's energy into doing it, I mean, it stayed as a resource for people, but I was really interested in finding a home for it, an organization who can kind of actively manage it over time, and that just didn't happen in this case, and it felt disappointing to me. So yeah, that would be another thing, is like that, short-term, long-term view, or how do you create the conditions for it to live on?
Okay.
Yeah. Alex, is there more you wanted to add around the work you're doing and how that connects in here?
I'm happy to share if we have time. I'm also happy to stay over the 30 minutes, whatever works for me.
There's a question from Marcia about the map getting posted on websites. Do you want to take that one, Katie?
Yeah. You can do whatever you want. In the case of the map I presented, it was private. We only made it available to those who are on it. But I do a lot of maps that are also public. I did the social gastronomy map, which I've presented before. I think it's socialgastronomy.org. cs.org/map. We did 2 map projects, a private one and a public one, and the public one just has, you know, basic information, and then the private one has a lot more detail and contact information, that kind of thing. And what I've learned is that no map project, I think, is ever completely private. Like if you really knew how, you could find the data. Is that right, Christine? Like it's pretty hard to find. It's not publicly available, but
Yeah, you can find it. You can, if you, we do have a little way we detour the data into Google Sheets and then strip out the, you know, the data set that's findable in Coop. So it, you know, if you've got some extra technical chops, you can make it impossible or as close to impossible as anything is on the web. But generally speaking, it's, yeah, some of that stuff can be findable, but you need to know how to find
technical skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, even private maps in Kumu, you can find the data somehow if you know how. I don't know how. I couldn't find
only
it.
in a private map. In a private map, the only people who can find the data are people who can see the map. So if it's a private map, the general public can't find the map and can't hack to see any data. But for instance, where you've got your map, where you're hiding you have a view for race, but you're not putting that for the whole network to see.
Right.
Anyone who can see the map can find that, but they'd have to know how. And generally speaking, it's enough to just remove those fields from what you're showing. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Christine, I know you had the 5 minutes of announcements and things at the end. Maybe do we want to do that now? And then if anybody wants to stay on and maybe hear more from you, Alex, I'm certainly interested and can chat a little longer.
Sure. Rebecca, why don't we have you go? And then I see there's a couple more questions, but Rebecca, you can do the announcements and then we'll.
Sure, just wanted to let everybody know that next Monday, the next deep dive session is going to include reflections from members of the community on experiences sharing the explainer graphic. And the following Monday will be our second ever quarterly community building session. And this just reflects people keep saying they like the other people they're meeting in these conversations and find each other interesting and want to get to know each other better. And so we've started having these as opportunities to pop into the map and take a peek at each other and talk about our shared interests and affinities, and also get a little bit more proficient in navigating the map as we do that. So those are the next 2 of our sessions coming up.
Thank you. That was really great. I'm just wondering if there's there's something. Louise, I think I addressed your question in the chat.
Yes, you did. I just wanted to make sure that if you'd made a slide presentation of the race data at a certain point in time and only published that presentation rather than the whole map to the whole network, would that be a way that people couldn't access that? But I suppose if they're already accessing all the data of the network, you'd have to maybe create a different map almost, and then be able to add that on.
Yeah, well, again, like that data is hidden. And again, it's like, I don't even know how you would find that data. It's somehow technically possible, but nobody is looking at it. It's quite private. And yeah, that slide, that's anonymous. We just shared that in the room with the 30 leaders. That wasn't shared beyond that, except for here.
Right. It's just a question of now knowing that it's there. If someone were motivated and technically skilled enough, the fact that it's linked to the map means, yeah, just thinking about, I mean, privacy is a huge, and confidentiality of information is a huge part of our job. So just thinking about how you'd have to work around that maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we have disclaimers about that. And I think finding that right language is really important. Yeah. Being transparent about that. Christine, is there more you want to add about that?
Oh, no, I think that's good. I was just also noticing that I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Natalia. Okay. Had a question. Do you want to voice it? We have just a couple more minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Was there a barrier that prevented other organizations from hosting the map and information? You mentioned that that was a hope of yours. And I'm wondering, if was it the cost of the tech, or was it the HR for updating it, or was it more political about how to be that unifying umbrella for others?
It certainly wasn't the cost of the map, because it's not very expensive. I think it was more just I don't know for sure, but I think of the couple of organizations that were interested, it was just like the level of priority and the, I think, amount of technical skill in maintaining it going forward over time, my guess.
Well, let's since we have a couple of minutes, but let's give those back to you if you need to jump off. And what we have a little closing ritual that we like to do together. And so let's go ahead and do that. And which is very simple. Just everyone unmute. I'll count down 3, 2, 1. When we get to 1, we just all give each other our blessings, our appreciation, our thanks for the day, or the rest of your day, however long that is. And if you want to stick around and chat further, just don't jump off when we're done with the saying goodbye. But if you need to jump off, it was wonderful to have you here. And let's go ahead and unmute and count down. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody. Have a beautiful
Bye.
day.
Very interesting.
Alex, did you want to share more about your project?
Sure. I should also, if you are willing to share your lists, kind of to the approach that you did, I would love to see that.
Which ones?
When you had it open, it was I can go through it again, but there was something that you offered to share. Kind of your
like
approach,
maybe
so.
there is like one is the different areas of water work. Then there's like the cross-sectoral ones. There's also watersheds and LA regions.
Especially how you organize it to kind of be able to do deep dives into specific areas, or just to give you a little bit of background, like what we're trying to use this for is we work with cities and communities around how do we decentralize our ability to innovate and strengthen local ecosystems for innovation. But within that, there's a lot of systems change and specific initiatives and specific organizations. So I'm just really curious to learn more about how the different maps are organized, so we can kind of dial in on different systemic issues, and also be able to tell from an ecosystems perspective how effective is that ecosystem. So I would love to learn that. So what I mentioned earlier is not necessarily relevant to that project, even though we are shaping it for that. But I run a program called Tech Stewardship with Mars Discovery District and Engineers Without Borders. Well, if anybody's interested, I'll send some links here. But in that we use, and am I able to share my screen?
Yeah, you can.
So I'll just do it briefly, if everybody can see my screen now. As part of our when we start working with stakeholders around tech stewardship, and regardless of sector, we outline what's the modes of practice, like how deep does the actual stakeholder want to get, and if you are committing to understanding what level of commitment it is, this is how you would go about it. That's the rationale for how you're engaging with it, and so forth. So I'm really interested in, has anybody used tools like that, aside from using sumApp as a data gathering tool? What other aspects have you kind of framed the engagement with stakeholders? Have you done sessions where you almost like a social lab, where you're kind of setting the stage, where you're setting the commitment required or at least desired? I'm really interested in understanding how different people have used sumApp, Kumu to kind of instill the value of participating in the activity.
Yeah. Katie, do you want to talk about that? Do you have, I can, but.
I'll share something, Christine, and maybe you can add, but yeah, I love using Kumu and sumApp for those purposes. I do a lot of causal loop mapping or working with groups to also shift mindset, right, from kind of more reductionist outcome to more relational and dynamic strategy. And so do a lot of work with multi-stakeholder groups in that direction. And then on the network mapping front, we've used that in a lot of ways. Like more in this project, it was more central, but in a lot of work where I do, you know, like for example, like I did a California farm to school project, and it was for the state government, but it was stakeholders from all across agriculture, food service, school systems. And we did a network map. I'm not using sumApp, but just because we weren't mapping the relational side, but just more like who's out there and who's working on these different issues, and just a great way to, before bringing people together, to help them get to know each other and know who's in the room, that kind of thing. Christine?
Yeah, so just in terms of the way I'm responding to the question has to do with platforms and technical sort of interfaces. Is that seem like part of the question? I mean, there's both the philosophical and then the technical parts.
It was more of an open question to see how do you, before you start the exercise of gathering the data, how do you set the stage for involvement and the importance of it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I would suggest, there's a fairly active mapper in our community, Ben Roberts, and Ben has done a number. Do you know Ben? He does some really great sort of, you know, landing pages and then links to various resources, and, you know, and he'll, you know, he does certainly, I mean, I do a lot of upfront presenting the purpose of social system mapping, and then with small, like with a design team. And so we'll go through, what are we trying to do with it? What are the goals? So this will be sort of in that upfront work in place of the interviews that Katie did, but a lot of sort of helping us understand what's possible and to envision what's possible, and then to sort of design the whole process together and implement it in an iterative, co-creative way. And so Ben does a lot of that, also does a lot of that using various, you know, platforms, interfaces, and walking through the technical pieces, as well as the sort of the cognitive co-creative pieces. And then I was also going to show you, just in our community of practice map, we have, so this is for our community practice, we have CODA. I don't know if you've been in our CODA. I think you have, yeah. And then we connect to it, you know, we have these various links in the map itself. And so these things all sort of are cross-referenced, going back and forth. It's all pretty much in revision right now. So everything is changing, but that connecting up the various, you know, sort of onboarding tools with processes, sort of part of what we're all exploring together, and what we're all trying to figure out a useful methodology around. So maybe that really didn't answer your question at all, but that's what it triggered in my mind.
No, it does, and I think especially for somebody that's new, all these tools, and especially the CODA repository, has been great for kind of explaining the background and giving examples, and I love that. But as we regularly work with ecosystem actors in all sectors, and I'm really interested in how we can use some of the same models for social labs or online sessions to kind of do the groundwork for have really effective engagement. And I'm just learning from this community about what has worked in the past, and what hasn't, and yeah.
Yeah. and I can just say that we're all learning that together. That's, you know, it's a new field. I mean, it's still a relatively new tool. I've made a bazillion mistakes. I've done I've done way more maps than anybody probably ever will, but already, and I would say I have failed in lots of ways, and so we're still, which doesn't mean I haven't also had some fun, really great successes, but it is emerging, and it's not like how it all fits together is sort of requires all of us to think through from all of our different perspectives and all of our different past experiences. So it's emerging, and we're co-creating.
And I think fields that I'm working on are similarly in the early stage, and that's why, for instance, I work with Tamarack around collective impact here in Canada, and they're really interested in kind of sumApp and CUM in general. And I just see alignment and synergies between the work in the different fields, and I'm just hoping to kind of see where the different fields can help each other as well.
Yeah, that's why we're here. That's what we're looking for. That's the hope. Yeah. Marsha.
Well, just sort of a follow-up to that question. So as you've mentioned, collective impact and Tamarack, that's what we have going on here, as well as a lot of our initiative where this would align with. But in addition to that, I'm kind of thinking about how the application of this mapping is it best to do it at the beginning of a network, or is it best to do it after your network is, you know, further along, and then you're trying to actually, you know, expand or identify the gaps or what's missing? Like, or could you use it in both to help you build and grow, and, you know, both ways? Would that be appropriate?
My stance is it's best to do it as soon as you can and keep doing it as long as you can.
Okay.
And to iterate it as you learn. So you're going to start from one place, and as you proceed, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to, you know, inferences are going to change, or, you know, what you think is important to look at is going to change. And I think there's a too soon, which is before anybody has any sense of what it is and is in the least bit interested. But that just means I mean, there's a capacity constraint. If people just don't have the capacity to even begin to learn about it, then it's too soon. But as soon as you can.
I want to add a couple of notes to that. I agree. Sooner and more and better. Socializing the map is super important. So every chance you get to put the map in front of people, if you're introducing someone, use their profile, and really get people used to it, the better. And I also know there's some people who will hate the map and don't want to engage it. And so I think it's really important to not make it mandatory in any way. Like, yes, please fill out the survey, and then never engage the map again. And we'll, you know, as a backbone, or as, you know, and also, like, sometimes you'll have a group of 4 or 5 people in a network who are super excited about the map, and you can create a little group out of them and have them interpret the map and bring it forward. And so again, like, across that spectrum of interest in engaging this technology, making it accessible and engaging for all levels, because you can get feedback like, here's what we're learning, or here's what we see, or here's one super easy way you can engage it if you want, but you don't have to. But the more I like using it really early, so that people can learn about each other, and it really accelerates that process of finding each other, and and also building a culture in the network of helping each other out. Like, a lot of these maps we make, you know, I need, like, what are skills I have and willing to share with others, and what are some areas that I really want help with, and again, building culture around that from the get-go is super helpful.
So if you were to bring a group of people together, and you actually did the survey, got them to fill that out directly into it, would that, in the middle of that meeting, could it happen that quickly that you would then be able to visualize this map right in the meeting?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's all live. It all happens quickly. So you can even, what I like to do is have kind of beta testers, or have a few people fill it out And then I use that to do the Kumu architecture and figure out the views that I want. And then people fill it out. Like a lot of people use sumApp and Kumu just for a meeting, right? Just for a conference. And you can use the sumApp as the conference registration form. And it's another great way to get people to fill it out, because we often struggle to get people to fill out the sumApp profiles or to go back to it. So as much as you can build that in to the native process, the better.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
But it's wonderful to see it live, like, you know, in a session, fill out this thing and then it pops up and you can immediately visualize it. Very impressive.
I think that would be a very strong feature for engaging people because I know in our community groups, it's everybody wants everything right now. So there's, you know, this long, if you have to sell it to them, and this, we're going to build this and 6 months from now we'll have this for you. You know, they don't have a lot of that sort of long-term patience at that early stages. Maybe later on it would be okay, but early on they want to see results.
Yeah. That was another thing we were designing for, was I did not like that. I had previously analyzed data in various contexts, and I didn't like that, you know, you close the survey and then a month later you present your findings. It just like, because you have to clean the data and then you have to analyze the data, you have to do, I wanted to just be able to visualize it right away and make it. So even, you know, this week I'm working with a client and he's got these ideas about how the survey should be and how the connection questions are. And I know that he isn't thinking of it in the right I mean, I know how he's thinking of it, and it's not going to work the way he thinks it's going to. And rather than explain that to him and try and tell him, no, it should be like this, I said, let's stick 5 people in there and give you an experience. So then he gets the email, he walks through the survey, he sees the connection questions. And then the next day he's like, oh, now that I see it, this was really useful. And now I'm having a lot of thoughts about how the survey should be different. And like, yay, I didn't have to have that. I didn't have to get on his nerves. I didn't have to spend a lot of energy trying to clarify. We didn't have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And they keep telling him, no, you don't see it yet. No, you don't see it yet. He could just see it. And then it was great. So I've always really valued the ability to for the people who are at the beginning of the process, for them to see what we're talking about in context, to see the interface, to see how it could work. That helps create their own sense of vision much better than, so, you know, like people always be like, oh, we're going to have all this turnaround and then we don't need the map until X. And I'm always like, well, that sounds great, but I get it for, you know, like I get something for them as soon as I possibly can, because I know they're thinking it's going to start to shift. And that's true whether they're, you know, a client hiring me to do a map or the people in the community who are asked to help inform the development of the map.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You made me think of like if you were using this in a sense to do an evaluation over time. So if you used it early on, you'd be able to save that map, would you? And then if you used it later on, you could use it to redo the map, so to speak, and then then you could compare and say, well, here's where we were and here's where we are today, or you know, is that an appropriate use of this?
Sure. We actually have what we call the time tagging function, so that sumApp actually will break the data that you can say how you want to break the time frames up, whether it's quarterly, yearly, and you can change this, and then sumApp will generate the data slice and the labels, and then you can show in Kumu, this was our network in 2018, this is it in 2019, 2020, etc. So you can, that's actually a feature built in that you can use.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's the bottom of the hour, so I want to just honor everyone's time and just feel free to join our Slack and put questions in there, or just keep coming back. We'd love to see you return, and we love to, you know, just continue to help you wrap your head around how you want to do this, if you want to do that, etc. So, but thank you so much, Katie. Is there any last words you want to share, Katie, before we jump off?
No, just really great to meet some new folks, and I don't often get out of my room, so thanks for being here and chatting. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great presentation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye all.
Good to see you all. Take
Bye.
care.